than a number of different leagues. So Serie A spent just 13 million more than Manchester City, whose spending in January was greater than all of Ligue 1, all of the Bundesliga, and all of La Liga, who was the lowest spender by quite a bit, only 26 million spent in La Liga. Kind of a shock, but for Manchester City, that is a lot of cash to spend on just a handful of players. So how much, Lahoud, do these moves help City achieve their goal of competing for a Champions League title and a top 4 or 5 finish in the Premier League?
Or, attaining an FFP charge officially.
I was just saying that those don't exist when it comes to Manchester City. Clearly it doesn't. I blacked out.
Their net spend was in the negatives in the summer, by the way.
So just make it up for.
No, at the beginning of this season, because they sold Julian Alvarez for a decent chunk.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of money. Look, I blacked out when you said Champions League because for me, no chance. This team isn't good enough to compete for a Champions League title. And the issues at the back, when you look at a lot of those players, the issues at the back are still there. Kusanov, they get from Lens, but I still have question marks. And it's still early on, but that's not going to move the needle for what they need right now. That's a project in the back line. It's an aging back line that needs a summer window to really boost it up. But the one that does catch my eye, and there's 2 players in there that catch my eyes for getting top 4, and I have a top 4 prediction that might wow or maybe infuriate a couple people maybe on this desk, especially those of you watching. But this is going to move the needle for Manchester City. I think getting Omar Marmoush, Kevin De Bruyne is getting older, and you need a refresh up there. And Marmoush has shown glimpses of what he can do in his debut for Manchester City. But Nico Gonzalez is one that really interests me. Not that one, not the one that got a reaction out of you.
Which
but
better?
The Spanish one that just came from FC Porto.
Which is better?
Your boy, the Argentinian one. I knew you were going to make me say that. No, but this is a move that really caught my eye because how many weeks do we come in on morning footy, scoreline, match day, and we belabor the point that's there for the taking? Manchester City have a massive void in the middle of the park in the figure of Rodri, and they haven't been able to replace it. They didn't plan to replace it.
This guy's not going to replace it.
It's not a like-for-like replacement, but it does intrigue me that Pep Guardiola, after getting smashed by Arsenal, that was enough for him to say, okay, we need to get some level of reinforcement in there. It's a different profile of player, but he's a player kind of in terms of, Rodri is a defensive midfielder, but he's a player that came through the Barcelona ranks that does have the profile to be a physical presence.
What wasn't good enough for Barcelona.
Yeah.
So they sent him on loan to Valencia, and then they sold him to Porto.
And he was young when he came through Barcelona. And Sergio Busquets.
And so was many other players that made it to Barcelona very
And Sergio
young.
Busquets was who he was trying to get the starting spot from.
An aging Sergio Busquets, and he couldn't stick it around enough, so they send him on loan to Valencia, and then they send it to Porto. Like, it's a big price tag for a player that isn't that great. Like, sure. You think he's that good?
I think he's promising, and I think it shows impetus. What else are they supposed to do?
But it's
Just let the season go by?
It's promising enough for Manchester City right now?
Yeah,
it's promising enough for Manchester City
At this point, Pep's trying to get anything and anything to shake things up to. Of course, they were going to go after center midfielder. I get it.
Yeah.
Wasn't just a little bit confusing or shocking. I wasn't expecting a Nico Gonzalez who wasn't good enough to cut it out of Barca.
I stand by that he is not a like-for-like replacement. You and I both.
No,
it is. There's only one
replacement.
Rodri. There's only one Rodri. But this move intrigues me because what Pep Guardiola can do with an intelligent footballer who shows maturity, he has become more mature since he's gotten to FC Porto, is Pep can mold him into a deep-lying playmaker that eventually, and this is bigger picture, you now have someone who can sit alongside, maybe play with a double pivot with Rodri.
Who dribbles people? Who takes people on? Foden isn't doing it anymore.
Savinho does.
Okay, Savinho
does.
But it's the only one.
Yeah,
Right.
Doku once he's healthy.
Right, but
those are your two players.
But how often can you rely on Doku when he's not that healthy? And is he good enough to be in and out starter? Pep's got him in a rotation. I personally rate Marmoush like the price tag that City put on him. I think he's that good. He showed in the Bundesliga that he can do it, and hopefully he can bring some of that form in order to break these passive dynamics that City have fallen into that they can't find a solution for. So I hope Nico Gonzalez is the one that brings it to the table and allows to set that tempo, kind of like Rodri did it And it helps open up the game for City. And yes, have Porto's one thing. Against a weakened Manchester United, it's another thing. But now it's in the Premier League when the margin of error is really thin. And from Nico Gonzalez, I'm not Pep. I haven't seen it. Maybe Pep does. But it was just to the whole point of signing this center midfielder that's kind of, I don't know if he was in obscurity, but not at the Premier League level, certainly not at the Barcelona level. I hadn't seen it before.
62 million, that's a vote of confidence. And look, City are going to need these signings to come in and make an impact quick, especially when you look at the games that they have coming up, including a Champions League knockout round playoff. So here's a look at their upcoming fixtures across all competitions, highlighted by the fact that they have to play Real Madrid twice across 2 legs in the Champions League knockout round or in the playoff to get into the round of 16. Nico, you're going to go through this list and give us your picks for how you think these matchups are going to play out. What do you all think? Lahoud, Kupo, you agree with this?
I'm intrigued by this. I agree with you in terms of the Champions League. I think we were both in the same mindset. And once I saw the draw this past Friday, my first thought was Chal City, especially with the issues they still have in the back line. The one that I think might flip is Tottenham.
Yeah.
Getting something against Spurs. I think they can beat Spurs.
I think they
especially
can too.
without Romero. Spurs is there for the taking.
Spurs is there for a taking at any point at any time right now this season, right? Like I get it. It's because it's City's bogey team for some reason. That's why I gave them
the one that I actually think there's a good chance they lose that one. Nottingham Forest at the City Ground.
Yeah.
I'm really high on this Nottingham Forest side, and so far this season, man, there's something in the water at the City Ground, especially at home. Nuno Espirito Santo will have that team ready.
Okay, so Nico's picks would put Manchester City on 45 points through March 8th and out of the Champions League. Okay, so when we look at these moves, Lahoud, for Manchester City and what they've done so far, and also when you factor in the contracts that they have expiring in the next couple of seasons, was this a little bit of a rebuild? Like a mini rebuild for Manchester City, just kind of starting to move the ball on what they're looking ahead to in the future? And how do these moves fit into the future plans of Manchester City?
I think largely they were, outside of Marmoush, panic buys. And Nico Gonzalez is a panic buy. And because the contract situation for a player that still has to prove himself, the void that's there in midfield, Ilkay Gundogan isn't getting any younger. He's only got a 1-year deal. Marmoush is the heir apparent to Kevin De Bruyne. These are panic buys right now, but Kusanov is a player that's one for the future, and he's not ready to step in yet. He proved it on his debut, and many a player would panic in that situation, but he's one that will develop into a starter for Man City. The players like a John Stones, I believe that he's a player that's playing for his future this very season. He's unreliable because of injuries, and there's still a lot of qualms about Ederson linked to the Saudi Pro League. How many more years or seasons? I know he's locked in until 2026, but he's one transfer window away from the next move. And James McAtee is a player that, if they haven't learned from the likes of losing a Cole Palmer to Chelsea, he's a player that I would lock in and get more minutes and get more appearances. I've loved what I've seen, his versatility. He can play anywhere in the middle of the park, and he's a player that Pep should give more chances to. But I think that these are, in large part, panic buys.
For me, said panic buy, what had panic buy written all over it is, in the very first game, he threw Kusanov out there, Marmoush out there immediately, right? And Kusanov
do
was
something.
Right, but like, given like what you've spent on it, like I feel like
as
the
nice
expectations are very high for these players, irrespective of how much was spent. Is like they're expecting instant impact, and I feel like that's kind of
solve issues. That's why I'm so intrigued by Nico Gonzalez. I wonder, like, it's good that midfield is going to be combining. You pay that money for Nico Gonzalez, you got to, and Porto's like, take him off for how much?
Andres Villas-Boas needs money like that. The club needs money. Club's in crisis right now, right?
Yeah, they drew yesterday, by the way.
With Nico Gonzalez, what he brings, and I think the question that I'm asking myself when I saw this, apart from, holy crap, they spent how much, is what does he bring to the City tie that they don't have right now? Why would you go and spend $60 million, other than the fact that he was once a Barcelona promising talent is
Like he brings more to the table than Gundogan.
Yeah, he brings a physicality to the table. He brings, he's 6'2", right? He can cover ground in the ways that Mateo Kovacic and Gundogan can't right now. And that's been a big issue for Manchester City. What they still lack, and I think what he lacks, that's concerning for me in the long run, and that's why I said it's going to come down to Pep Guardiola, because he does have it in him. His positional awareness on the defensive end. When he was playing at Porto, he was playing more in an offensive, maybe box-to-box profile or attacking midfield.
Alan Varela, that was Alan Varela's role, more defensively. They played, because under Conceição, they played a 4-2-3-1, and there was a more defensive-minded, more deep-lying center midfielder, and Nico Gonzalez was the complement to that. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Lots of questions.
It's a roll of the dice.
Not a lot of answers.
Yeah.
We'll find out those answers when we see the play happen on the field. But I do have a question for you, Mike Lahoud, and that is, what does the top 5 look like in the Premier League? Excuse me. Hello, can get my question out. With the transfer deadline, now in the rearview mirror.
Liverpool will win the Premier League. I've always thought that.
No!
That's not the
Shocking.
one, though.
Oh, sorry.
Arsenal to come in second.
Take a swig of mate and then give
Arsenal
me the
to come in
obvious.
second.
Okay.